I just want to make sure that I do this justice because, obviously, I'm rambling on here about Joe Rogan and why Joe Rogan should be fired in honor of Black History Month. And when I say fired, I'm not calling for the canceling of Joe Rogan or the boycotting of Joe Rogan. I think all of that is it's a little bit, you know, like who would want to be canceled? So I wouldn't want that for me. So I wouldn't call for that for anybody. But you know what I would want for me? I would want to become a better person. I would. If I disrespected so many people who felt a certain way, I would want to take responsibility for it, and I would want to become a better person for it. So Joe Rogan, I'm gonna play the rest of his response here because it gets worse, guys. And if you just listen to what Joe Rogan is saying, listen to Joe Rogan's response, right? Just continue to listen here.
Racist, and I certainly would never. And it's all smushed together, and it looks fucking horrible. Even to want to offend someone for entertainment with something as stupid as racism. My sincere and humble apologies. I wish there was more that I could say, but all of this is just me talking from the bottom of my heart. It makes me sick watching that video.
You know what, Joe? It makes me sick listening to your apology, and it makes me sick, having to do this reaction video right now, because it's like, dude, I like you. you know, I threw my hat into this podcasting space because of you, right? I'm like, okay, we're different. So before before I get into this and and break it down, he opens up with "Hello, friends," and so here's the thing, about even doing this, doing this pod right now about this is like, I like Joe Rogan. I'm an avid Joe Rogan listener. Huge fan of his work. As a matter of fact, I'm doing this podcast because I like Joe Rogan so much, right? And he inspired me to, to kind of like get off my ass and like, yeah, you can do that, right? Because of the work that he's put in. My first reaction video, and this is my second reaction video. Up until this point, I've been doing straight fire your boss videos that really talked about, just firing your boss, and in the fire your boss universe. A boss is not just a physical place that you go to work, or a physical person that's your employer. A boss is anyone, anything, any way of thinking, being, any philosophy and ideology that really gets in the way of you maximizing your full potential and being the best version of yourself. And I think this applies because Joe Rogan is the largest podcaster, really the largest broadcaster on the planet, right? Like when you really think about his reach, I mean, sometimes you have 20 million people listening to to some of his episodes, right? The dude is massive, right? And so to hear him, and also just to understand like his impact on culture, right? Like he is he has this gigantic podcast. He is the host of the UFC. Every major, he announces the UFC fights. He used to host the Fear Factor. Just did a massive deal with Spotify about a year or so ago, where they did over $100 million, and that's just on that side. When you get into the endorsement deals and all of the other revenue streams that he has as a result of this podcast, you're talking about hundreds of millions and millions of dollars here, right? So Joe Rogan is huge, and by now, we should know that, right? So what got me off on this was listening to Joe Rogan, one of his podcasts where he was on with Jordan Peterson, and they were having just a regular conversation, a Joe Rogan type conversation, where Joe Rogan kind of like broke out into kind of like how weird and interesting it is that you know that black people have so many different shades and hues, right? And the interesting thing is, I was a little offended just like listening to that, and that's why I did the first episode. And the offense just came from the fact that it's like it was kind of weird, seeing two white men sit around defining what blackness should be, and how it's weird because of the different hues, how someone can be the complexion of Joe Rogan and still be considered black in reference to, Professor Eric Dyson, who was at the center of that conversation. And so the offense came from the fact that they were just defining who we are in such a cavalier way, where he actually used the term running around Africa butt naked, no clothes on, right? You almost can't blame Joe Rogan, because if you grew up watching Tarzan, like what else would you what else would you think? If that's your only reference of Africa, you know. So so that's what really set me off on this. And again, I like Joe Rogan, but here's the deal: this isn't about Joe Rogan. It's really about the folks who are offended by what Joe Rogan has to say, and not just black people. I think that there's a lot of people who are offended by what Joe Rogan is saying. But it's really understanding that, like, attention is the currency, and where you put your attention means everything, especially the world that we're in. So the folks who are listening to this right now, the folks who might share this, thank you. I appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy day and schedules to to click on this video and to spend your 15 to 20 minutes or so listening to this, if you listen to this for the entirety. And by the way, I'm encouraging that, because it's like the longer you listen, it's the better you kind of like rank on YouTube, right? So the point that I'm making is that Joe Rogan has ratcheted up the temperature, so to speak, because he just had a video apologizing for his use of the N-word. And when I first decided to drop this, to make this reaction video, wasn't thinking about Joe Rogan using the N-word, right? Because and part of me not thinking that is like, the brand that he's built is, it's this ultra masculine, pop culture, broad pop culture, brand that really extends towards, music and fighting and entertainment, right? And so he's a comedian. So there's a little bit of cover there in terms of him. Well, if he's telling a joke, or if he's using it in context to to tell a story, to describe something, right? But I don't know who the comedian was. There was another comedian I was checking out who was talking about that. He was like, I'm a comic. And and a lot of that stuff gets a pass with me, but this is different. And when I started like digging and started listening to people like India Ari and how she felt, and and really hearing and just how he's using the word, or the N word, right? And and also listening to his stories about how he talks about black people, right? Clearly Joe Rogan has an opinion of black people that says that we're less than, based on how he is discussing and talking about us, right? And and so for that, I just want to say this, Joe Rogan, right? Because at the end of the day, right, I'm not an ape, I'm not a monkey, right? And just because you have a mic, and just because people pay you attention, it doesn't make you any better or any less than anybody else. You found it, right? I mean that that just flies of so much bullshit in so many different ways that it's a hard pill to swallow. Like I wouldn't feel and I am not advocating for Joe Rogan to be canceled, right? I don't think canceling people in society makes much of a sense. I think people's viewpoints, they evolve. If they're legitimately evolving, I think people change. People, learn new information. They get better, right? There's a better version of Joe Rogan someplace out there, right? So I'm not advocating for Joe Rogan to be canceled, right? But until I see a better version of Joe Rogan, until I hear a better apology from Joe Rogan, and you might say, well, who the fuck are you to decide whether or not Joe Rogan's apology is acceptable to you? Well, who's anyone to decide whether or not an apology is acceptable, right? I'm just telling you how I'm feeling, right? That respecting Joe Rogan as a podcaster and being inspired by him and folks like Joe Buttons. Big up to Joe Buttons and the work that he's putting in, right? I can't, in good conscience, I would never feel comfortable listening to Joe Rogan again, or even watching a UFC fight again, and just hear him call that fight, especially if he's calling a fight between a white fighter and a black fighter, because I know how, based on how he's talked about this, that there is some underlying feeling of superiority there, and otherizing there, that you're like, well, I can't really support that. Right? And because attention is the currency, I can't give him my currency and I can't give him my attention. I can't do that, and I think everybody has to decide that for themselves. But here's the as I say that in one breath, in the other breath, I think that this is also a teachable moment, not just for Joe Rogan. I think for for a lot of people, right? There's a whole host of conversations that's happening right now about race, like the whole NFL thing, which I'm going to be doing a reaction video about that, the Whoopi Goldberg thing, which I've done a reaction video about that, and I'll get it out there. But there's a whole host of conversations being taking place around race and culture and society, and the future of the country, and where people are going with all of this. And I think that Joe Rogan has a massive opportunity, right, to really take a step back and not just put out a friend's I'm sorry apology, but to really convene a real conversation, because he has the ability to do that, right? He, like, it would really be dope. And this is a Joe Rogan, if you're listening, it'd be great if you could bring on, if you had Joe Buttons on the podcast, and if you had a Kaepernick on the podcast, and talking about these issues, and legitimately talking about them, and hopefully you can learn something. Someone can bridge the gap in your understanding of why it's so disrespectful and hurtful and dangerous for you to use your platform to be so cavalier when talking about black people, right? That's why you have so some of the challenges that you see out in the larger society, because of that mentality, that way of thinking, that way of being okay with with feeling a sense of superiority over another human being, right? That's why the world is the way it is in a lot of ways, and I think that there's an opportunity there for Joe Rogan to kind of like impact that conversation. So I'm not calling for Joe Rogan to be canceled. I'm calling for Joe Rogan to kind of like fire that way of thinking and being. I'm calling for Joe Rogan to be an ally and be part of the solution and not part of the problem, because he has that massive platform. I'm calling for Joe Rogan to convene a conversation on race, not from the perspective of how we see it done in new media, but in from how Joe Rogan is doing it in the podcasting world, with real, just everyday people, right, who give a damn about the conversation, right? And so the Joe Rogan controversy is extended into I believe it's Neil Young. I don't know much about Neil Young's music, right? So I'm not even going to act like I do, because I don't. But he's pulled his music from Spotify, and then India.Arie, who has really brought a lot of attention to. So let me clear that up. Neil Young did not pull his music because of the racial comments. He pulled his music for another reason, which, I don't know enough about to really go into. So I'm going to just stay in my lane. So India.Arie, she pulled her music, and she pulled it because she didn't want to. Well, basically, she said that she spoke to some of the execs over at Spotify, and she was told that the music, and especially black music, is a major part of the foundation. The audience of Spotify, right? And she was offended that they get paid pennies, and Joe Rogan gets $100 million contract, and so the foundation, which is supported by a lot of black people and people of color, right, is funding this guy's ability to go talk shit about the very people that's supporting the platform that's paying him. So all of that is kind of like mixed up in this, right? So I think everybody got to draw their own conclusion. But in honor of Black History Month, I'm like, we should fire Joe Rogan, and I think Joe Rogan should kind of like fire that way of thinking and being, and legitimately take responsibility for for what he said, and for that way of a little bit, and the issue with Joe Rogan comment is the fact that he does have this massive platform. He reaches hundreds of millions of people, right? Or millions and millions of people, with each episodes, and so for him to be so cavalier about how he talks about black culture and blackness, right, and to have such little regard and respect, where he feels he can sit down with Jordan Peterson and decide what that should be. And look, don't have a problem with him talking about that. I think in context, that's a legitimate conversation on a podcast, right? But you might want to have a black person there with a perspective that can give you some real insight on black culture and black perspective versus deciding in a conversation what that is for you and being so disrespectful around.
Now, I know that to most people, there's no context where a white person is ever allowed to say that word, never mind publicly on a podcast. And I agree with that now. I haven't said it in years, but for a long time, when I would bring that word up.
Look, the N-word, I'm not a nigger, so the N-word doesn't bother me. Like, what is that? The definition of a nigger is an ignorant person, someone who's void of knowledge, of understanding of themselves, and possibly a whole bunch of other things, right? So, doesn't really, like, I don't know how I feel about that word, but I don't want to be called that word. I don't want to be referred to as that word, right? By Joe Rogan or anyone else. And and I'm kind of torn about that because I play a lot of ball, and I'm black, and you hear that word a lot, right? In context. But coming from a Joe Rogan, right? But to know that you considered me a gorilla, an ape, to know that that's like somewhere in your world that a joke can be made of me and people who look like me, it's kind of that's unnerving, man. That's not cool. You should be embarrassed. You should do something about this. Like, really do something. Yeah, you did fuck up, and you have to clean it up, because it's like your platform is too big for you to make this type of a mistake. You influence too many people for you to be influencing people in this direction. And for you to be insulting people like this. I mean, you said it yourself. Those were your words, not mine. Those were your words. try to, on my podcast, Osiris J. Fire Your Boss podcast, I try to talk about the issues that I care about. And what I care about is like entrepreneurship. What I care about is like, freedom and abundance and balance and becoming the best version of yourself and wealth building. I care about those things, right? I'm not gonna talk about things that I don't care about or I don't know about. This is a topic that I care about, and it's relative because it's the way of thinking. And in the Fire Your Boss universe, we want people to not just fire their physical boss, because if you can't, professional development and personal development has to go hand in hand to create true success, right? And you can achieve, Joe Rogan, you can achieve all of this fame and notoriety and even your subscription base might even grow as a result of this. Because I'm sure someplace somebody out there is like, well, there's nothing wrong with saying what you're saying to those monkeys. There's some people who legitimately feel that way. I'm not going to share that story right now. No, I'm going to share it. I was working on a project with someone, and we were in his office on Madison Avenue in the 20s. And so it was about, I don't know, maybe it's me and him alone in the office. This was after work hours. We had gone back and forth. And when he finally realized that, I just wasn't going to allow him to rob me, he made a monkey comment. He actually made a monkey comment. He made a monkey joke, right? And, so the gentleman was Irish, and, that has nothing to do with, he could have been freaking a Martian, right? But I say that he was Irish because of my response, I turned around and looked at him, and I looked at him, and because everything had changed at that point. And I looked at him and I said, no, this little green-ass, drunken-ass leprechaun did not just call me a monkey. I said, you didn't call me a monkey, did you? And he turned flush red, and he kind of got nervous because he saw the switch turn in my eyes. And he, I forget exactly what he said. And I say, see monkey do. Right? No, I'm not a monkey. And the fact that you would call me a monkey and, refer to us as planets of the apes, Joe? Seriously? Seriously. Right? And what I love about this moment is that, dude, I actually see something in you. I see the light in you. I think what makes you special, what I love about your podcast, is that you really get in there and just have these unscripted, conversation. And it's part of the why I'm having such a hard time to say I'm never going to listen to the Joe Rogan experience again. I would never say that, right? But I'm going to be watching and I'm going to be listening, and I might be commenting on your anything that touches this. I'm probably going to comment on it. I'm probably going to have a reaction on it because I just feel like it's that important, right? And you're too big, and the potential in front of you is too massive for you to not respect a culture that you claim to love so much, a culture that you seem to soak up all the time, right? If you really love it, then you should be a part of the solution in improving it. And that it is the conversation around race and that subtle ignorance that that seems to permeate so much and so many people. You say that this is coming, you have these conversations from your heart, and I'm going to take you at your word. But you can't now switch up when the heat is on your ass. You can't say, well, I was trying to be funny, right? I was, nah, man, you did fuck up, and you did offend. Now I'm looking to see how you're gonna really take responsibility for it outside of this video. Like that's really what my ears to the ground right now, and I would suspect that a lot of people who like you and a lot of people who support your work, they're probably feeling the same way, right? I just think that we're in a world right now where there's a lot for people to be touchy about, and people want to cancel people, and I just don't. That's not what this is about. I think that this is a massive opportunity for you, man, and I'm happy for you. I'm really sincerely happy that this is happening to you, because you get an opportunity to evolve your programming, and you get an opportunity to become the best version of you. The question is, are you going to embrace that? I think you will. I actually think you will. I've listened to enough of your podcast to know that you have substance, man, and you have character. However misguided it is when it comes to the issue of race and black people, and your opinion on black people and what blackness is. I think it's severely misguided based on everything that I've heard. And somebody needs to get to you. Somebody needs to educate you. And you need to make yourself available for that education. Hell, I raise my hand. I'll do it. I think I can do it. I think I can have some real conversations with you around, these issues. And it has nothing to do with politics. That's the point. It's just about having a conversation and being authentic. I don't know if anybody who's going to see this podcast, if you see and if you know Joe Rogan, Joe, I would love to talk to you, man. You've offended me that bad where it doesn't matter how big you are. I want to sit down with you, man. I wanna really understand, outside of the understanding that I have, because I feel like I grew up in a pretty diverse community, and I didn't just I wasn't on the planet of the apes, Joe. And now you feel I feel a certain way around that. I can't believe like my son feeling like he's an ape, thinking that like somebody would actually say that to me. What the hell is that about? Right? Like, you don't get a pass for that, and you need to be in conversations with real people. When you're talking about black culture, you need to have somebody black at the table, bro. It's sort of like the NFL. When 70% of your players are black, you should probably have a few black coaches. I don't know. Who knows? Right? I don't know much about anything. But like, that's just some common sense shit. It's just some real common sense stuff. Let's continue to listen to what Joe Rogan has to say.
Like if it would come up in conversation, instead of saying the N-word, I would just say the word. I thought as long as it was in context, people would understand what I was doing. I was also talking about how there's not another word like it in the entire English language, because it's a word where only one group of people is allowed to use it, and they can use it in so many different ways. Like if a white person says that word, it's racist and toxic.
I really think that in Joe's apology, this is where he kind of like went off the rail, man, because it's like, on one hand, you're apologizing, but then you're saying that it's a strange word because this group that you've just offended, they're able to use it, right? And it's strange, and you really don't understand why they were able to use it, and that in and of itself is what's so strange around this whole conversation, because I feel like that's where your willful ignorance is on display, right? Like you know, and as a podcaster, and you make your living talking, and I've thrown my hat in that ring, and sometimes you might kind of like diverge into a word soup. Where you're kind of like not understanding what you're talking about. But I think when you're dealing with a topic that is so incendiary, right, you want to make sure that you don't offend people. and and it's given the platform that you have, man. It's yeah, you did fuck up, right? And the question is how you gonna address that. Let's hear Joe out thinking. So here's Joe Rogan's apologize. I'm gonna play a little bit of it, and then I'll come back.
I'm making this video to talk about the most regretful and shameful thing that I've ever had to talk about publicly. There's a video that's out that's a compilation of me saying the N-word. It's a video that's made of clips taken out of context of me of 12 years of conversations on my podcast, and it's all smushed together, and it looks fucking horrible, even to me.
So this has been going on for 12 years, folks. I mean, for 12 years. So Joe Rogan has been talking shit about black people for 12 years. And I didn't know about it. Shame on me, right? Shame on me, because I used to watch Fear Factor. And every once in a while I'll catch a good fight on the UFC. I don't watch every one of their production, and I listen to his work as a podcaster on YouTube, right? But it's been going on for 12 years. So here's more of Joe Rogan.
I know that to most people, there is no context where a white person is ever allowed to say that word, never mind publicly on a podcast. And I agree with that now. I haven't said it in years, but for a long time, when I would bring that word up, like if it would come up in conversation, instead of saying the N-word, I would just say the word. I thought as long as it was in context, people would understand what I was doing. I was also talking about how there's not another word like it in the entire English language, because it's a word where only one group of people is allowed to use it, and they can use it in so many different ways.
Okay, so that's one of the areas where I have a little bit of an issue with his apology. It's like, okay, I'm sorry, I did this, I've been doing it for 12 years, but it's a word that is so strange, that I used to use it in context, and it's the one word that can be used by other people, and there's no issues, right? I think context is king. The context that you're setting around something creates the content that emerges. So let's just talk about that a little bit, Joe, right? So if you're on stage and you're telling a funny joke, and you're using the word in context, right? I think that, yeah, you could legitimately get a pass for that, right? If you're in a movie, right, and it's an artistic expression, and for example, Django, Leonardo DiCaprio using the word, right, in that context to contextualize that time period, okay, right? But in the context that I'm hearing you use the word in, coupled with the conversation that you're having, that you were having, talking about blackness, right? And listening to your apology here, and we're going to play a little bit more of your apology, because I don't want to take your words out of context, Joe, right? When you put all of that in context, you're like, wait, something is wrong here. Either Joe Rogan is a staunch racist, or he's simply ignorant and entitled, or somewhere in between, right? Guys, look, there are different degrees of murder, right? There's attempted murder, there's vehicular manslaughter, there's premeditated murder, right? There's, I'm not a lawyer, so, I don't know all the terminologies when it comes to the various degrees of murder, right? There's involuntary manslaughter. I think I already said that, right? But there's also varying degrees of racism, right? I'm not saying that I don't. Do I believe that that Joe Rogan is a card carrying member of the KKK? I don't believe that, right? I don't believe that. Over the years listening to him, and in context, and just some of the relationships that he clearly have with people, I don't believe that. But I think that there's a willful ignorance that Joe Rogan is demonstrating to all of us, that allows for racist thinking and being, right? In a way that's been accepted for far too long by so many people, and it's really one of the underbellies that's like rotting that's always rotted at the core of the American society, right? And I think that there's an opportunity here for Joe Rogan to address that. Joe, if you really want to apologize, don't just apologize. You've been doing this for 12 years, right? And it has an impact. Tell us what you're going to do, Joe. Tell us what organizations, what people, what conversations are you going to convene to really address it, because this is not good enough. Let me play you a little bit more of Joe Rogan's apology. Listen to Joe Rogan's apology.
A white person says that word. It's racist and toxic, but a black person can use it, and it could be a punchline. It could be a term of endearment. It could be lyrics to a rap song. It could be a positive affirmation. It's a very unusual word, but it's not my word to use. I'm well aware of that now. And there's another clip that I have to address. There's a clip from 11 years ago. I was telling a story in the podcast about how me and my friend Tommy and his girlfriend...
It's not his word to use. And he knows that now. I wonder why you know it now, Joe. What happened? That all of a sudden you know that. But then there's another clip. It gets worse, right? Joe is digging himself deeper and deeper in, right? It's getting worse, so just bear with me for a second.
We got really high. We were in Philadelphia, and we went to go see Planet of the Apes. And
all right, so context here, right? So Joe Rogan is talking about, he's with a bunch of friends. They're out on the town, and they're looking to go see a movie, Planet of the Apes, right? And listen to Joe Rogan in his own words. They were really high. So he didn't know what he was doing. He was drunk. Sort of like, I had sex, but I was drunk. Right? Dude, are you serious?
We didn't know where we were going. We just got dropped off by a cab, and we got dropped off in this all-black neighborhood. And I was trying to make the story entertaining, and I said, we got out, and it was like we were in Africa. It's like we were in Planet of the Apes.
It's a story now.
I did not, nor would I ever say that black people are apes, but it sure fucking sounded like that. And I immediately afterwards said, that's a racist thing to say. I deleted that whole podcast, but obviously somebody made a clip out of it and taken out of context. It looks terrible, but it looks terrible even in context. It's a fucking idiotic thing to say, and I was just trying to be entertaining. I certainly wasn't trying to be...
See, here's the thing. Like Joe Rogan, for those of you who don't know, Joe Rogan, and I didn't always know this about Joe Rogan, but he's a pretty accomplished comedian, right? Apparently, he has real comedic chops. I've never really listened to one of his sets comedically. None of that. But he's talking out of both sides of his ass here. On one hand, you said it, because you walked into a theater, all black people, and I actually heard the clip. You guys should go listen to the clip, and judge for yourself, right? Because Joe Rogan right now is on a PR tour, and he's looking to clean this up. And guys, remember now, I don't dislike Joe Rogan. Up until the last week or so, I was a massive Joe Rogan fan. A huge Joe Rogan fan. I just launched my podcast. This is a brand new podcast, right? And here I am doing a reaction video to one of the guys who inspired me to launch the podcast, right? So I'm not I'm trying to bash Joe Rogan. These are Joe Rogan's words. He felt like he was on Planets of the Apes. But I'm not calling. He walks into a movie theater, all black people, and he felt like he was dropped off in Planets of the Apes. But I'm not suggesting that black people are apes. Joe, you can't have it both ways, bro. But he was trying to be funny. He was trying to tell a story. Was he on stage? No, Joe, you were out on the town with your friends. And you were high. And you were having a good time. And that's what came out of you. Right? So it's like these are your own words, Joe. These are your own words. Right? And I'm glad that you did the apology, because it's like this is, sometimes we don't even know how we're being and who we're being. We don't know how we're being and who we're being. And, doing my research for this, I heard your other apology. I'm talking to Joe Rogan right now, because I'm a black man. I have black children. They live in a world where color and the context of this society is constantly on the ballot, and it's a topic of great concern and conversation, right? And we see it plays out in so many deadly ways, all the time, right? And across every institution, whether it's law enforcement, education, now healthcare, and employment, it's always playing out, right? And it's not the card carrying member and the hood donning KKK members that I think is the most dangerous element of this. I think it's the subtle, the passive, the cool, hey buddy, hey brother type of a unconscious racist that's really dangerous, because on one hand it's like you don't want to acknowledge your racism, and so the fact that you can't acknowledge it keeps it in place. If look, alcoholics, right? The first thing that you have to do to kick the habit is to admit that you're an addict. And here we have a case where Joe Rogan doesn't want to admit that he has racist ideologies. And they're showing up in his language. They're showing up in his way of being. And he's on a podcast that's reaching millions of people with this racist ideology. And all I'm saying is, and again, this is not about canceling Joe Rogan. This is a teachable moment. But you got to take responsibility for that, man. You have to take responsibility for that. In your first apology, where I think I saw it on CNN, where you're apologizing for something else, you said you didn't plan to have this massive platform. It kind of like happened. So you've been blessed. God has given you much. So to whom much is given, much is expected. So it's not enough for you to just say that I'm sorry when so much harm and so much damage has been done. Right? And there's probably going to be a bunch of people in the comment section that's gonna get at me as a result of this. There's a lot going on right now in this subject matter, right? A lot. In the NFL, Brian Florio or Flores. If I'm chopping up Brian's name, then Brian, please forgive me. Salute, Brian. What you're doing is commendable. That's what real heroes are. Like, Brian is literally falling on the sword of his professional football coaching career to address the issue of discrimination in the NFL hiring practices. And I'll do a reaction video around that as well. As Black History Month, so we'll do a couple of these reaction videos. I don't want to get lost in the whole race conversation, but it's just there, right? Like, it just never goes away, right? So Joe Rogan, in honor of Black History Month, you're fired. And you should fire your way of thinking. when it comes to this issue. I'm Osiris J, and I'm out. Peace.